DJ and PK brought to you in part by Cafe Rio. Win lunch from the zone at Cafe Rio on Taco Tuesdays. Listen every Tuesday for your chance to win a $20 Cafe Rio gift card. Learn more about Taco Tuesday and the great deals available every week at CafeRio.com. DJ and PK, we're joined now by Tim Fitzgerald, covering Kansas State as publisher of GoPowerCat.com. Tim, good morning.
Good morning. I just want to warn you, I'm sitting on my back porch. It's beautiful, but we have a neighborhood rooster, so you're going to hear that. I do not live in the country. I live in the middle of Manhattan, Kansas.
All right, we're ready for the rooster at any moment. We've been doing this show for more than 20 years. We haven't had this happen. We're ready for a major interruption from livestock.
Yes, it's different. Yeah, it's odd.
Just really as long as your predictions don't make you eat crow, we're fine.
I like that. See, a little good pun in here. It's a good way to start this segment.
Don't encourage him. You never know where this might go. You're playing with a live wire here, Tim. Let's start with Kansas State. High expectations for this team. Everybody had it top three in the league, some higher or lower, but always top three. The first half against Tulane, game 2, the first game was a money game. They handled business. It's going poorly, down 20-10. They rally and win. A bizarro play at the end to get the win off the strip sack when it looked like Tulane was driving for the game-winning play, but whatever. And since halftime of that game, the last 6 quarters have been brilliant. Have they figured something out? Because there hasn't been much to whine about in the last game and a half.
Yeah, I think they did. I think they went to Tulane and they were sleepwalking, and which is interesting because that's exactly what they did when Tulane won in Manhattan in 2022. So they about repeated the same mistake, but this team was good enough to get out of that problem. Enough playmakers on this team to save the day. It was an awful performance, and the secondary was just a mess through much of that game. And that was a little worrisome with Arizona coming in, but they seem to have gotten everything cinched up, fixed, and at least right now they look like a football team that has a really high ceiling.
Avery Johnson in the game, the most recent game, I think he ran over for 100 yards, which is the first time a quarterback for K-State has done that in 4 years. I think Will Howard got it in 2020. I'm wondering, things break down, the pockets starts to get a little dirty. He steps out of it. Is he a quarterback who is looking to throw first or looking to run first?
A throw. He will let it. He'll roll out. He's better outside the pocket, much better, with clean vision, and also he's better throwing the ball at odd angles, moving across his body and just standing tall in the pocket. It's something they have been trying to work on early in the season, is leaving him in the pocket, but it also took away a lot of his game. They unleashed him against Arizona. But, yeah, he'll move around, and if he's got nothing, he'll take off and jet. He picked up a number of first downs with his legs, and that's really how he was the most effective. He kept sustaining drives, and once in a while he'd rip off a pretty good run, and other times he'd just sit back there and throw the ball. So he's a sneaky little guy. I mean, he can jet, guys. He was the fastest guy on the team last year, and then they brought in Dylan Edwards, who's faster. So there's a lot of speed in that backfield.
DJ Giddens is a top 20 running back, over 100 yards a game through 3 games. K-State's over 240 yards, top 20 rushing attack. BYU, much better against the run. Top 40 now versus 112 last year. If the Cougars hold K-State under 200 yards, which nobody has done yet, does that make K-State vulnerable? Is there a threshold where you look at it and say, if they don't run the ball to this point, they can't get it done?
That's a great question. And honestly, I don't know yet with this team because it is a little bit different team in how it's designed and how it can respond, because Avery is much more dangerous. I would think it would make it difficult, but they also at some point are going to open up the passing game. They have no receivers with touchdowns so far this season. So they haven't really etched into that part of the playbook very deep. So if they get into that position, it will be interesting to see how they respond.
Yeah, you speak of that, and I was looking it up. The tight ends in the red zone seems to be the target and the direction they're going. Tell us about those tight ends and how dangerous they are in those situations.
really dangerous because you get a lot of play action down there in the red zone, and the tight ends appear to be blocking, and then they're not. And most of those passes, guys, to the tight ends in the red zone have been wide open. A lot of just sneaking out and going to the corner where nobody is, and he just lays the ball in there. They've been pretty easy throws for Avery. They're going to keep doing that until someone solves it, and then they'll move on to something else. But they've got 3 tight ends. They're all equally effective in the passing game, and they're all wear similar numbers, and it gets very confusing for my old eyes.
You mentioned there were problems in the secondary against Tulane. BYU has not been running the ball very well. They've been throwing it. Can they, if they keep picking on K-State, are there going to be big plays there?
There could be, yeah. There really could be if you get into the blown coverages that they did against Tulane. It was almost like some guys were just not paying attention to what the signal was off the sideline. There was one touchdown where one of the experienced corners was sitting there in zone when they were supposed to be playing man. So just those kind of mental blunders were really costly. But one of the things I saw a quarterback do for BYU is he's a really precise passer. So if you're playing zone, a guy will settle into a little crease and boom, he'll hit him with it. And that can sustain drives. K-State's good at taking away your run. So if you could do that to perpetuate drives, it could be very effective. And that really is my biggest concern with BYU. They'll just kind of pick you apart and maybe hit you deep when once you realize you got a problem closer to the line of scrimmage. Watching them play, it's a really interesting, entertaining brand of football they're playing right now.
As I look at this K-State team in the depth chart, I see, I think, 2 transfers each on both sides of the ball, and I see a ton of juniors, seniors. I think there's like 4 sophomores in the 2 deep. They've got much younger guys. So my point of where I'm going to this team is really built to win now, wouldn't you say?
Yeah. They've got they're young at certain spots, but they do have a layer of veterans. This is for some of these guys, this is the last hurrah of the COVID season. And when you're at K-State, you get a lot of former walk-ons in your starting lineup, or the guys that weren't highly valued coming out of high school and might have been 2 or 3 stars that you signed. And those guys don't have NFL awaiting, so they're going to play as long as they can. And that's been a real benefit for K-State. I think it's been a little loophole that's closed the gap for a lot of these programs, at least in the temporary sense, where they can get veteran and older, while some of the teams that are getting the 4 or 5 stars consistently, those guys ain't sticking around. So that's been a really benefit for K-State, and they do have some of those guys that have been with them quite a while and have really settled into leadership and are playmakers like Brendan Mott at defensive end and Austin Moore at outside linebacker. They're those small-town guys that can flat-out play football.
Is there a feeling based on what you've seen from the Big 12 so far this year that if K-State can win this game, late-night game at elevation, all that stuff, in a place they haven't been at BYU, and then they got Oklahoma State at home the next week, and if they start 2-0, they could miss the Big 12 title game. There are still 7 games to go, but they're set up great, and it is hard to believe they would miss the Big 12 title game if they get off to a 2-0 start, given who they got down the road after that. Yeah,
it's funny how once you start playing the games, the tough and easy games evolve very quickly. This was probably viewed by most fans as a game they were going to go in there and roll, and now BYU looks like a vastly improved team. And yes, you're right. You'll get the elevation, which you knew you were going to get, but now this late night game. I was all for Big 12 After Dark until it affected me, and now I'm against it. But it's interesting because Kansas has faded, West Virginia has faded. Those were 2 games I saw as big hurdles. Iowa State still looms there at the very end of the season because I think Iowa State's pretty good. But, yeah, this new schedule, it's hard to predict games. For example, Arizona State looked like a gimme at the start of the year, and now all of a sudden they're playing football. So we'll see. This is a big game because they do have Oklahoma State looming next week, and you can't take a peek off that opponent in front of you, because if you do, you're going to lose in this conference. That's exactly how you lose in this conference. So K-State's got to be really focused in on the Cougars.
And the Utes have Oklahoma State this week in Stillwater, and then they've got Arizona next week, and that's on paper looked like that was going to be a big game. The Cats have sort of stumbled a little bit, a win over Northern Arizona, which was expected, but it wasn't light up the scoreboard as we expected. And then, obviously, they struggled last Friday night. I thought they moved the ball halfway decent through the air, but it didn't result in points. The other Wildcats get the big punt return, and so the game was a little lopsided. What's your assessment of Arizona now?
I think it's a pretty good team. They have some defensive line issues that K-State absolutely dominated that group. They didn't feel the edge very well. One of their D tackles was just getting pushed off the line. They don't seem as physical as you need to be in this conference. And I think BYU discovered that pretty quickly, that you better be physical or you're going to get bullied. And it looks like they've answered that. Utah fits the conference better than anyone else because they are physical. But, yeah, I think the schedule makers had some fun with this front-loading of key games because it was obvious. Oklahoma State, K-State, Oklahoma State, Utah, Arizona were going to be important games in this conference, and they front-loaded everything, and I think it was intentional. I don't think this was a computer by chance. I think Brett Yormark wanted to get eyeballs on this conference early on and maybe try to bring in some outside viewers that discovered and enjoyed the brand of football.
That is a really late rooster. I mean, roosters are supposed to. The sun's coming up. The sun's been up for a while now. What's the deal? That's a late.
He's stressed out. He's got a hard job, and he's got so many wives. He can't keep track of them all, and he's right on a busy street. So he's constantly screaming for help, and we just like to listen to him suffer. Yeah. That's the kind of people we are.
Yeah, you kind of sound like me. Giddens. Is it true, man? This guy has never fumbled the ball once in third year. He just holds on the ball, total ball security every time he gets the ball.
You just dropped something on me I didn't realize. I can't think of him fumbling. You talk about a rock-solid running back that just picks up yards, goes constantly falls forward, makes the first tackle miss, is physical. Might get into the open field, but will probably get run down because he's not the fastest guy. And this is one of the players that kind of sums up Kansas State. He was a late signee, 2-star. Why did you sign him? He's never going to pan out, and he just developed into a great football player very quickly. And that's pretty common of some of these Kansas kids on this roster. They just erupt into something. Most of the key players, many of the key players on this team are from Kansas, so they've done a good job with that. But DJ Giddens is a great kid. He's really quiet, extremely quiet, and he doesn't really want to talk about football. He wants to talk about fishing, which I don't want to talk about. So I try to talk football. But he's a really quiet guy, and you'll hear probably a reference at some point after beating KU. He calmly looked at the camera and said, "The locker room was turned." And that now every time he makes a run, Chris Kleiman says he was turned. I'm not sure what turned is. I think I've done it to my ankle, but it sounded like fun for the locker room.
They trailed in that Tulane game basically the whole game, get kicked an early field goal, but they trailed the whole rest of that game. But they ran the ball 33 times and only passed it 23. So they are going to be, when it comes to play calling, they are completely dedicated to that run game. And even if BYU shuts them down and does a good job in the first half and has a halftime lead, they're not going away from it, are they? They are going to keep pounding away.
Yeah, you got to bury them to get them into the full into the passing game. If the math works and they can run it and still come back, they're going to do that. And being physical and winning that line of scrimmage is the foundation of everything they try to do. They don't try to finesse you, although they got a couple dudes in Avery Johnson and Dylan Edwards that can play finesse football. They try to wear you out, and that's been an effective formula for K-State football for a while, and they're going to stick with it. They will run the ball relentlessly, and then just pass it for effect. But they're going to make sure you keep coming up. The safeties have to keep paying attention to the backfield so that they might get the big play over the top.
Tim, we're going to leave you to that rooster, which there's one more, which has entertained us nonstop, and get a nap on Saturday because it's going to be a late night.
Guys, what are we doing here? We're playing football in the middle of the night. I mean, I'm old. 10 o'clock's my bedtime. I don't understand.
There's money to be made in L.A. and San Francisco and Seattle, Portland, and all the other West Coast cities. So that it's prime time there. It's super late in Kansas, but it's prime time.
Yeah, in those places, they're just dying to watch Big 12 football.
I don't know if you know this, PK, but they're gamblers who will watch any game.
So it doesn't matter what time they start. We'll start it at 6 p.m. then. If they're going to watch any game, why play it so freaking late?
So there can be a fourth game for them to gamble on that day.
They can gamble anytime.
TV window.
You don't have to wait till late to gamble.
But after you've lost the first
dying
three,
like this rooster's going to do.
You're winning it back on the last game. All right, thanks, Tim. We'll continue to argue, and you can try to quiet down the neighborhood.
There will always be a last game.
Thanks, boys.
All right, thanks, Tim. DJ PK, it's 97.5 The Zone. Coming up at 9 o'clock, the Utah Hockey Club has their media day. The president, the GM, the head coach, star players. You'll hear from them between 9 and noon right here on The Zone. Stay with us.
I'm going to tell you once today. Nominate the youth sports volunteer that you know for the Hercules Hero of the Week. Submit your nomination at kslsports.com/contest. And then listen every Thursday afternoon to our guys, JJ and Alex, for the winner. Help us celebrate the efforts of those volunteers making an impact for the Hercules Hero of the Week. And it's sponsored by Hercules First Federal Credit Union and Beehive Meals.
DJ PK, it's 97.5 The Zone. Tim Fitzgerald, covering Kansas State. His publisher, GoPowerCat.com, just joined us and said that he's old and he goes to bed at 10 and he does not like these late kickoffs, which will be 9:30 his time, 8:30 here. But PK, money makes the world go round. They're getting paid for these games.
I try to go to bed at 10 o'clock, too. Most of the time.
That would be halftime here locally, and you will
do it.
Not go to bed at halftime.
Saturday night. Obviously, I'm talking weeknights.
Yeah, when you got to get up the next morning.
I go nuts on the next weekends.
Hey, now.
My hair comes down.
What a visual.
But I have to agree with him. Why the heck are we doing this? Who's going to be watching these games? San Francisco doesn't watch Stanford and Cal. They sure as heck ain't watching a Big 12 game.
I mean, the answer is 1 or 2 million people are going to be watching this game.
You think that many?
Yeah.
Wow.
I mean, I don't think 2 will be watching this game. It would take a big game probably later in the season. Certainly if they put Dion in this time slot.
Okay, well, I asked you how many people are watching this game, and you told me, then you changed it.
I think this time slot.
You know about that stuff.
This time slot, 1 or 2 million people for the game.
Really?
Yes. And that's why they get their $30 million a year.
But they've never played a Big 12 game at this time. So there's no reference point for a Big 12 game.
Well, that's true, and if you're right, and they only get 500,000 in this time slot, they're going to get a lot less in their next TV contract because they're getting.
Well, but maybe they can play it in another time of day and still get the same amount.
Except they can't because the Big Ten and the SEC are playing the other time of day. You brought this up previously, and this to me, the point you brought up previously is more important than this one. Either one could have some truth in them. But you said when Utah plays Oklahoma State at 2 o'clock, is it going to be overshadowed? I mean, USC is playing Michigan, I think. That's the big game head-to-head with it.
Big names.
Yeah, more people are more likely to watch that game. Now, depending on the quality of the game, you'll see some channel surfing and all that stuff. But that's a big worry. They do have data on BYU playing in this time slot, and they use that to project – okay, BYU versus K-State. Yeah, it's late, but it was late UCF came out here and played a night game a couple of years ago, 5 years ago maybe, Yak? When was it? They were out here. I think USF did too. So they have seen teams from the Central and Eastern time zone come play games against BYU at night. Toledo, wasn't there a wild Toledo game at night?
Yes, and
both teams scored 50 points.
Do you remember
that was a Friday.
When Bronco brought Virginia back here?
Yeah.
There was so much talk from Bronco. Well, our guys, it's be at 10:30 on their body clocks, blah, 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 blah. And their fans, I remember the discourse online. What time are we playing?
Yeah.
I don't have a body clock. This body responds whenever I ask it.
Okay.
All right.
I think I'd rather talk TV time slots. No. I know I'd rather talk
you
TV
guys
time
brought
slots.
up body clock, not me.
Let me hear your body clock. Your body clock. There, that had to be done. Now we got that out of the way. Now, what was your point?
I just don't know if it's the right thing to do. It sounds good, but this is a brand new entity.
Yep.
There's nobody on the West Coast going to be watching this game. They don't care.
There will be people on the West Coast watching this game.
Obviously there's going to be people, but I'm talking in real numbers.
Well, that's how you get 1 or 2 million. Big time football games, college football games can get 4, 6, 8, 10 million people. And you're right. Those are at different times and have teams that have bigger fan bases and pull in big numbers in big markets. And this game isn't going to do that. It's not going to have 6 million viewers.
So I think they need to think about this, because I think that when Ohio State comes out and plays Washington, Oregon, the LA's, and it's 7:30 their time, they'll get the numbers. But we're asking in the West, where there's not as many people. Most of the folks are over there in the Pacific time zone, and we're asking them to buy into a Big 12 game. They haven't paid a lick of attention to the Big 12, and if they did, it's centered around Oklahoma and Texas, and they're gone.
Which is why this league's getting 30 million per year.
I
and
hate
those
to be
leagues
Paul
are getting
Feinbaum
60,
here, but
80,
nobody
100 million.
cares. I care.
It's why they get less money, and it's why they play in less desirable time slots.
But they might be able to get just as much in a better time slot, because now you're asking the kids and this old man here, broadcaster, they're going to get back, and this rooster is going to be crowing by the time they land in Manhattan, Kansas. This is actually later for them. And we've all heard every single coach has at least publicly once or twice. Winningham doesn't like to do it because he likes to be tough guy at all times. We'll play it, whatever. He's got that mantra. He never varies from it, and it's been successful, so keep doing it. But we've heard the folks in Tempe. We've heard the folks in Tucson, vice versa, all the way up there in Seattle. Mm-hmm. They're getting back at 4 or 5 in the morning.
Yep.
And that's going to be unacceptable. You're going to hear these folks in the Big 12 now say, what the heck is this? This is ridiculous. It's not just the game being played and not just having to sit around all day. I get all that. That's a pain in the butt. Mm-hmm. But, they're sort of already doing it anyway. If it starts at 6 o'clock, what's the difference? You're sitting around all day. So you sit around, by that point, you sit around another 90 minutes. Run around a block or something if you need to. You know what I mean? I don't think it's that big of a deal because they're already doing that so far as it is. But now, the after effect, Sunday, totally wiped out.
Yep.
Nobody can...
Anybody who's ever traveled knows what you're talking about.
Yeah.
100%.
Yeah. Forget that. You just can't just
taking
sleep
a nap,
like that and all that.
Taking a nap on the plane
that sounds
and then
good,
waking up and going home.
But it's a nap.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then you're wound up and you go to campus or you go to the airport. Then if you live on campus, you live off campus, wherever it might be, blah, blah, blah. You got to do all that. I think that there's going to be a louder form of pushback than what we saw in the Pac-12. The Pac-12 was just like, well, suck it up.
Well, and there
tough.
was yeah, it was. You're right. Suck it up for that, right? And those teams were in the West Coast, and it was the key TV audience.
It made sense.
So while you were talking there, I looked it up. Your Sun Devils played Mississippi State in a late-night game in this window. It was an 8:30 Mountain Time kickoff.
A couple weeks ago.
And they had 954,000 viewers on ESPN. Now, does anyone in San Francisco care about ASU, Mississippi State, right?
Not anymore.
They got 1 million viewers. You get paid for that. They can not take the money and play at regular teams and get people.
Can you find another time slot that's more amenable to get that same amount of money? You can't? Why not?
Because the Big Ten and the SEC have taken most of them, and you already have some of them.
You're just naming 2 networks. This is an old world out there with streaming. This is not 1987 anymore. There's all sorts of ways you could broadcast the game, and we'll see that in 15, 20 years when I'm pushing up daisies. There's going to be a whole lot of other stuff out there that doesn't exist right now, or we didn't think it existed right now. We're already seeing it, obviously, with the NFL doing and all that stuff.
True TV, ESPN,
Fox
FS1.
TV, I don't care the legitimacy of the TV.
You can play on all of those, but people don't go to those channels for games. Right now. And nobody went to ESPN in the 70s. Because it didn't exist.
Right. So, yes, I understand that.
Maybe when they're all on streaming services, but there'll be other games on, so will people watch those? I mean,
well, if we knew the answer, we would automatically do it.
Right. And they will watch the numbers, and they will adjust the TV deal going forward.
And I think we'll see a pullback. Mississippi State does it. Anybody can do it one time. And it's a non-conference game. You still got another week to go before you get into conference, blah, blah, blah. And hey, Mississippi State, the next week, they were wiped out and got blown out by Toledo. So
maybe they're just awful and going to get blown out a lot.
I know, but I can use that as a point. I mean, what the heck? So why not?
Well, I think to your point about that, in a 16-team league, how many late-night games are teams going to have to play? Especially these teams coming from the Central and Eastern time zone and flying back. Are they going to have to do it once? Are they going to have to do it twice? How often is it going to happen?
3 times a nightmare.
Hey, now. Because the next week, you were just checking the times, the Eastern teams don't have to do it. They're going to put an Arizona-Utah game in that time slot.
Right. And we're used to it.
Right. Arizona's done it before.
And Arizona, this time of year, they'll gain an hour going home. Because this time of year,
they'll still get home at a ridiculous hour, but they are used to it and won't be quite as ridiculous.
And
the question is,
how many
times do you have to be the road team in a late night game? Can they spread the pain around the league?
If they start doing this more and more with these central time zones,
they're going to push back.
The original, I call it the original Big 12, the teams that we recognize as
Iowa State, Kansas State, Texas Tech, who've been doing this a long time. Right.
I think they're going to
they're going to push back. Where someone might look at UCF and say, "You're new to the club. This is the price you pay. Deal with it."
And that's even worse. Then they're going another hour.
Yeah.
And then
now this year UCF. Well, we'll check. I guess maybe they could go to an Arizona school. They have Utah and BYU coming in.
They do.
Yeah, and a lot of these teams in these bigger league, I think UCF is playing Utah and BYU twice each in a 4-year span. So they only have to come out here one time in 4 years, and will that be a late night game?
I know that UCF's coming out here next year to BYU.
Yeah.
But at the same time, they can massage that, and they need to. There's no question they need to.
Right.
But I just wonder what the rating is going to be.
You're not the only one. I mean, people check these.
Big 12 playing in Los Angeles and all up and down the West Coast, all the way from Chula Vista to the Canadian border,
nice.
All the way up. How much interest is there going to be now? Especially when you've got 4 schools that could be playing in that time zone that you've been following. It will be a Big Ten game, and it has the potential to be a marquee Big Ten game, at least brand name, I should say.
If they put a UCLA-Oregon game in that time slot, can UCLA give them a game? And if so, will we watch? Because we want to see Oregon lose because everybody roots against Nike, even though we're not in that league anymore.
Yeah, but that's us.
Yeah.
But I'm talking about the folks in California who've been following Pac-12 football, and it goes up against the Big 12. If I were working in California
You'd
still.
Be watching Pac-12 over Big 12, yeah.
Well, it would be Big 10.
Yeah, excuse me, you're right. Big 10 over Big 12.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Right.
So,
I wouldn't have, maybe for me it's different because I did go to a school that is in the Big 12. I'm just thinking all my Daily Breeze comrades and how we used to. That's when I really got into college football. In the 80s, because I was a pro guy coming from the Northeast.
You had USC people annoying you, and you could annoy them.
Right, and they were good. Everybody, and the Devils were good then. And we used to, we didn't fight or anything, but we'd trash talk pretty harsh. went on a off-season vacation, sends a postcard back to the Daily Breeze room, and P.S. Tell Kinahan ASU is putrid.
Nice.
That's because we had those rivalries going on there, and a couple of guys were UC Los Angeles, and most of them were SC, but we went back and forth. So I wondered, those guys, they probably have totally, maybe not yet, but over time they're going to totally tune out the Big 12.
Okay, San Diego State played Cal. There weren't many late night games this past week, but they played on ESPN in this late night thing. Now they are West Coast teams,
Yeah,
so
West Coast
San
teams.
Diego and the Bay
And we're
Area
used
could be
to watching them.
938,000.
Yeah.
I'd have to look at way more games, but I wonder if you just put a game on in that window, are there a million people will sit there and watch football on ESPN?
A million West Coast. It's not a million, but it's a West Coast game that we've been doing now for a number of years. I do it. BYU game is winding down. I don't know what's on, right? I don't memorize it because I knew I'm watching Utah, and that's going to bleed right into BYU. So I got 6-7 hours locked down, right? And the game is over, and I start, there's got to be a West Coast game. And I go look, and I didn't watch the whole game, but I did watch a little bit of Cal and San Diego State because it's what I do.
Yeah.
But I wonder over time if those folks there are going to be in the Big 12 football.
Over time, that'll be something to watch. I'm New Mexico, Arizona, 950,000 people watched on a Saturday night at 8:30. Now, two Western schools, to your point,
Right.
not a Central Time Zone school in there.
Right.
The Friday night game, TCU Stanford, the opening week, did 1.5 million kicking off at 8:30 Mountain Time. Now, TCU was coming out of the Central Time Zone. And they got 1.5 million people, and you can get paid real money for that.
Yeah, early in the season, you don't know what you got going on there.
And maybe that 1.5, I'd have to check other Friday night numbers here. Maybe that 1.5 was because it was a season opening weekend and there was more buzz and, football's here.
Right.
Yeah.
And then it does harm to the youngsters and to everybody.
I totally get the complaints about getting back home. Anybody who's getting home at 3 a.m. or later, that's just way late. I mean, 3, 4, 5 a.m. arrivals, and there are plenty of those stories from plenty of schools.
What time do
So
you
when
go
they
to
complain, they're not whining. I mean, that's a reason. That's a legit problem.
Yuck. What time do you go to bed at an 8:30 BYU home game start?
Conservatively, 2 a.m.
Yeah. That's what I was going to guess.
Yeah, because
what I was gonna
when
guess.
I would cover those games, and by the time I drive back, it's 2 freaking
And
a.m.
you gotta wind down. There's all the conversation and the light.
That's
and
my problem is I need to wind down
Right.
before I can fall
You
asleep.
need to wind down.
The biggest
I
thing
totally
is our
get it.
post-game show this weekend is probably going to start, if we're lucky, at midnight.
Yeah.
But you'll have an audience because there'll be people in cars going home.
And that's the thing. Yeah.
right.
I'm not the only one. There's 60,000 other people doing the same thing.
Right. And they want to hear whatever people have to say after the game.
But you ain't having an audience in Manhattan, Kansas.
There you go. Oh, those when they have to do the post-game show for a road game, the audience is the people in cars. It's not people at home watching the game on TV then.
Right.
Yeah,
They're gone.
The road radio post-game show doesn't get the numbers.
And
the
I
home
wonder
radio
what those
post-game show
numbers
does.
are as the game progresses.
Yeah.
When do they identify those numbers?
Well, somewhere, and I don't have access to them, when you get the ratings, you get them for every 15 minutes all day long for every station. Now, I can see the numbers for the over-the-air stations in Salt Lake, but I don't see them for the cable stations locally or nationally. And nationally is what they really care. That's what they're, if you're selling tires or you're selling insurance or soda or whatever, how many eyeballs are seeing this commercial? What am I paying for? And if they can get 1 million people to watch a game,
Yeah, but
They're
are
gonna
they
make
watching
money.
it the whole time?
well, they'll know by the quarter hour. And the advertisers will know too.
Yeah, but we won't know. You don't
No,
know.
no,
I
no.
want to know. You got that shit. Instead of looking up crap, I want you to do that.
Okay. DJ and PK. We are brought to you in part by Lumen Technologies. Your life moves fast. Quantum fiber internet is faster. Move up to tomorrow's speed today. Go to quantumfiber.com. That's quantumfiber.com. Coming up next, we got to win tickets Wednesday. We got to do that. We got to give away tickets to see Pitbull right after the break. Stick around.
It's game week for the Cougars. And the Zone is getting you ready for kickoff. After a win against Wyoming, Kalani Sitake and the Cougars return home to Provo as they open up Big 12 play with a battle against Kansas State. Listen all week long for the best coverage of Cougar football and your chance to win tickets to the game. Then catch the Cougar pregame show this Saturday at 7:30 with a postgame show immediately following the game. Your home for the best coverage of Cougar football is live on air, online, and on the KSL Sports app.
Yeah, boy.
This is 97.5, the KSL Sports Zone.
The Hercules Salt Lake County High School Player of the Week is West High School's Louis Hamilton, who led the Panthers to a 36-31 win over Alta. Hamilton caught 8 passes for 136 yards and 1 touchdown, while also running for 125 yards in the win. At Hercules, they are celebrating the everyday victories. Hercules First Federal Credit Union, growing stronger together. DJ and PK, it's 97.5 The Zone. PK, there's a new law in Georgia. Schools in Georgia have legal cover to immediately begin paying their athletes directly, according to an executive order signed by the state's governor yesterday. Governor Brian Kemp signed an order that prohibits the NCAA or conferences from punishing any university or college in Georgia for offering compensation or compensating an intercollegiate student athlete for the use of such students' NIL. What comes next, PK?
The baby in the carriage. K-I-S-S-I-N-G.
What comes next, PK?
Paying everybody. Youth conference kids.
Pay the high school recruits?
Yeah. We already got, I saw some email that it's come a couple of times of some people really furious that one of these youth conference league, not teams, I guess, programs, just got all sorts of kids from out of boundaries.
Yeah?
They're gonna take legal action over that. I got to get those Mighty Might state championships, and go all the way, man. I'm all for it.
Professionalize everything and go.
It's already being done.
So might as well do it above board and let us all know about it.
To whatever extent we do know about it. I don't know we'll know everything. But, yeah. Because it has to be that way. Because if you're paying your freshman tight end, well, why wouldn't you want to pay the kid? Here's what you can get when you're here. It's the same thing like these kids who don't have a lot of money, or they used to not have a lot of money, and they were going to turn pro, and they get the money in advance because they turn pro in January, but the draft isn't until whether it's the NFL is in April or the NBA is in June.
So what would happen
they get
is
that money ahead of time.
The agent would write a check to the player. It would help the agent sign the player.
Exactly.
The player gets his money in January. The agent gets paid back in July or September when the checks are coming in, when that first rookie season starts.
Right.
So the same principle is, why wouldn't a college go to a 4 or 5 star kid? Hey, we're not going to miss with that 6'6", 310-pound lineman. That guy's an NFL guy in 3 years. We're not even getting him for 4.
He's an NFL guy now, but they make him wait.
Right. So why not? Yeah. When you got a junior, senior running back who's running for 2,000 yards.
What's the difference?
And runs a 4.40. I mean, get him. Yeah.
The principle is the exact same.
And there's nothing that's going to stop that. And if this law didn't work, they could get another one pushed through in 30 minutes that did work.
So have at it.
And go.
Yeah.
So we're going to have teenage professional athletes.
These teenagers in this AAU stuff, aren't they basically that way? They're getting aligned. You always hear, they're not going to go to that school because that school is a fill-in-the-blank shoe.
Nike, Reebok, different. Adidas, right. And the programs are aligned and the colleges are aligned. Yeah. So a kid isn't coming out looking at 300 schools. He's looking at however many schools that apparel company, that shoe company has. Right. Whether they've got 40 or 140.
Yeah, it's already going on to a large extent. So what the crap is the difference?
If you think that sounds like a farm system, that's because it is, because nobody wants to miss out on the next Jordan.
We've heard about that for years.
They cast the wide net and figure, well, somewhere in there, we got the next big thing.
Yeah, and in hoops, a lot of times they do.
All right, DJ PK coming up. There's a Woj bomb, Yak. What?
The biggest one ever?
The last one?
Well, maybe so.
All right, we will get to that next. Also, Utah Hockey Club Media Day starting the 9 o'clock hour. We're going to hear from the president, the GM, the coach, star players, 9 to noon for the Media Day, Utah Hockey Club. Stay with us, DJ and PK. It's 97.5 The Zone. Yak wants to give away tickets right now. Caller 12, 801-575-ZONE. 801-575-ZONE wins a pair of tickets to see Pitbull at the Utah First Credit Union Amphitheater on September 25th. Why? Because it's a Win Tickets Wednesday. That's why. Caller 12 right now, 801-575-ZONE. Gets a pair of tickets to see Pitbull at the Utah First Credit Union Amphitheater September 25th. Utah Hockey Club Media Day, next.